Hey everyone, welcome to Techstore Gang. Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. The big news on Friday was that a trade deal. Well, the president of the U.S. announced that he had a trade deal done with China. Lo and behold, the Chinese actually confirmed that there was some sort of deal done. We're going to get into the particulars of it. I know when I read it, I don't know, it was a little less than I was expecting. But Mike, am I just am I am I unrealistic in my hopes? What's going on?
Well, as is always the case with these things, the devil's in the details, and we'll see how the details emerge, hopefully over the coming week. But it would appear that China is not going to try to hold its rare earth metals as hostage anymore, and we in turn are going to tone down the tariffs on the technology products, which is the part of this thing I think we care about most. But let's start with Stacy on this one because it's as much about the psychology of the deals and what it does to everybody's thinking as much as it is the actual, how much am I going to pay for X, Y, and Z? And I'd love to get your opinion. It seems to me that for the last 6 months, it's just been a lot of uncertainty, and everybody who is uncertain winds up, hoping for the best and planning for the worst, and then a lot of bad decisions get made. So, what's your take on what does this do? Is this just going to take everybody's temperature down?
Yeah, I think first off, people have to know what to believe. And when things like this come up, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation. Is this something that's going to go through? Will it fall through? I mean, there's just been so much talk going on. And then once it's determined, okay, yes, this is something I have to move through, there comes the question of what does this look like? Are we managing our supply? How are we going to manage the tariffs? What programs are we using? What's our platform for managing supply chain? And then in amidst that, when you think about cybersecurity, who's thinking about the risk? And there's research and data that says that cyber terrorism. I mean, this is the kind of environment that can be rife for that because it's a little bit chaotic, and companies are trying to figure out what does this mean for them. Does it mean something? Is this really what's going to happen? Is this what it looks like? And then what's the process for going through that and going through that securely and responsibly? And I think it poses a lot of questions. At any time there's questions, doubt, and uncertainty within a business environment, there's always ripples and effect that we all feel from that. So I think when the news came out, I know for me personally, the first question was like, okay, is this real? Are we really doing this? What's going on? And it was hard, as I'm reading the articles and I'm looking at this, I'm like, well, what is the opinion? What is the thought? If this is something that's real, what direction are we going in? So in this environment, which it's like getting this sort of news, one would be wondering, how are we going to do this? Then add it to the climate that we're in and everything. It's like, okay, what does this look like in reality for us? And then how do we do this securely and responsibly? A lot of questions get asked. And again, with that doubt and uncertainty that can have ripples and effects for everybody.
I don't think it matters much. This is, I, I guess, I don't really buy rare earth minerals personally, but I do buy plastic things. I buy clothing, and I don't think that this is going to have much of an impact on the day-to-day spend of most Americans. Now, that being said, it's great that the rare earth mineral, export agreement is in place. We need it for our defense. I guess we need it for probably computers and phones, but for the most part, this is not going to impact everybody. Americans going to Target and Walmart.
So, Mike, when I first saw the headline that we had a trade deal done with China, silly me, I thought we really had a trade deal done with China. What we really, and I've read it now over across a half a dozen different sources. What it seems to me is this is nothing more than the Chinese have been kind enough to allow us to spend our money buying their rare earth minerals and keep us on the heroin that is our dependency on China for these minerals. And sometimes you got to pull the Band-Aid off and just go cold turkey to get the monkey off your back. We need alternative sources for these rare earth minerals. I used to think when I first heard about the rare earth mineral thing that, wow, China must be blessed that all these rare earth minerals happen to be in China. Well, no, they're not all in China. But what China's done is they've gone out and financed and entered into agreements with countries and areas where rare earth minerals are, such as the African Republic of Congo and so forth, and Brazil and everywhere else, where they basically have the monopoly to get the rare earth minerals where they are, bring them into China for processing, and then export them at a very high profits, good business, to dupes like the U.S. who are just going to, stay on the heroin. And what did we give up for getting this right to continue spending a lot of money on rare earth minerals through China? Well, we've lowered our tariffs and opened up some forbidden technology that we weren't going to give them. The tariffs are still very high, and they're mutually high, right? Going back and forth. Our coming into the U.S. is higher than going into China. But really, what do we really want in a China trade pact? We want access to Chinese markets. They've got 1.5 billion people. We want to be able to sell our products in there. We want protection for our IP, right? If things are going to be made in China, we don't want to see knockoffs of it before it even gets across the ocean in the shipping container, right? We want protections of our IP. Those are the things that I want in a China deal. This very much to me sounded as a preamble deal, but it really doesn't get to the crux of what we need from a China trade policy.
Yeah, I'm trying to look up what chapter in Art of the Deal that this actually goes with, and it doesn't seem to line up at all.
There's a long-term strategic aspect of it and a short-term aspect of it, right? And I think the what we've given up, you're right, Alan, and we've given up a lot for a short-term gain. And the real question is, what's the U.S. going to do in the long term? The U.S. itself is sitting on millions of metric tons of rare earth minerals that we are not getting right now for a variety of both economic and political reasons. And we've just discovered what is believed to be over 1 billion metric tons of additional rare earth deposits throughout the country. And I think we're sort of now where we are with fracking in oil, where if we invest the right amount of know-how and dollars, we can get access to huge deposits that we didn't think exist anymore, that we didn't think exist, right? And that could change the game. So it's a question of, what do you do between now and opening up the U.S. ability to manufacture, and how long does it take us to do that investment, get the know-how, and start producing and become self-sufficient rather than relying on China?
Well, I'm a San Bernardino girl. I was born and raised in San Bernardino, California, and we have the Mountain Pass mine. And most of what they pull out of that Mountain Pass mine goes to China for processing. It's one of the largest deposits of rare earth minerals in the world. And we send it to China for processing. So I think Alan's onto something. It shouldn't be a Chinese trade deal. It should be a new way forward for processing these rare earth minerals, because we have them here. We're just not processing. I think China processes probably close to 80 or 90% of the rare earth minerals that we send over there. So from a perspective, looking at the hood, we have in San Bernardino, in that county, we have pushed for processing for a very long time. And I think Texas actually is starting to, I think the DOD put some money into some processing plants in Texas to address this.
This is an old from an old playbook. The British, this is what made Victoria great, right? They would import raw materials from throughout the empire, from the U.S. and Canada, North America, South America, Asia, Africa, and they would turn those raw materials into finished products, flax, cloth, or timber into ships, and steel and iron, and sold it at huge markups. And that's what made the British Empire what it was.
The word you're looking for is mercantilism.
Okay, mercantile.
if I'm a business owner, what I'm thinking is I'm thinking, okay, there's this deal, there's the specifics of this deal, but what does this mean for China and U.S. relations? And I think Jack, so you're saying like there's the short term and then the long term. And is this the beginning of a better trade deal, of other opportunities that we can then build upon? Is this the start of something that we can agree on, or is this just kind of a one-off short-term solution to address a short-term issue or placate demands?
Well, one of the things that Alan said was about intellectual property protection, right? And if China is taking raw materials and processing them, giving back essentially another form of raw materials, there's not a lot of intellectual property there, right? We know how to do that as well. We're just choosing not to do it for a variety of, right, mostly economic and regulatory reasons. But if we manufacture other goods like chips or clothing or designs, those designs, that intellectual property is where we end up losing big time when the Chinese Communist Party doesn't have the concept of intellectual property. Everything belongs to the state, right? So if we bring those types of manufacturing back to the United States, which is what we're starting to do, we protect that intellectual property. And that's, I think, very good for the United States in the long run. I also believe we should do the raw materials processing here, but I think the intellectual property theft part of it is less risky.
And I don't think there was anything in this agreement. In fact, this is only temporary, right? It's only 90 days. We have to have a discussion again in 90 days in September. So we'll see what happens.
This is the MO here of the administration, right? They're long on PR and short on substance. We were supposed to have 90 deals in 90 days. We've got one with the UK, which is kind of like kissing your sister, or your cousin or whatever. So they had to have another deal. So they're touting this as a deal.
All right. So in the next election cycle, though, the phrase "drill, baby, drill" will be replaced by "mine, baby, mine," right?
Possibly. They've been saying that in California for a long time.
It's process, baby.
Processing.
That's
We're mining. We're just not processing.
Right. That's where the issue is. But let's also that they also teased a huge deal on the books, maybe with India, and then if everyone else doesn't line up, we're just going to send letters and put them in buckets. Something like that was the quote. And taco. That's all. Taco. We'll see how this goes.
I don't know. I'm waiting to see what the EU does with China, because it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out around the world, because, there are other trade deals out there that can impact us.
And keep in mind, this does not impact most American consumers. This is not going to make things cheaper.
Not directly, but I think there's that misinformation, disinformation impact that in that way it affects people, the frustration, the tension. Like it's not as tangible as, okay, I'm pulling out my wallet doing it, but like we're absorbing all of this negative energy. And even if we're looking at this and saying, okay, my business isn't impacted by minerals and whatnot, and you're still asking that question of like, what's going to happen? Where are we going to go with this? And that's creating so much anxiety and risk because we don't know what's going on and we don't like sitting in uncertainty. That's not how we're built.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. This, of course, we recorded this on Friday. The whole thing may blow up by the time you're watching this on Monday. We'll see where it goes. Let's take a break here on Tech Strong Gang. We're going to come back, and I'm going to give a report about what I did on my summer vacation in New York City this week. You're watching Tech Strong Gang.